Okay, folks, so this right here is generalship traits, right? These are basically traits of a leader at the highest levels. Now, again, we're looking at officers, O1 to, generals, right? I mean, we're basically looking at the leaders who make the most important decisions at the highest levels in military matters. And again, these are, although these are focused on military leaders, right? We are looking, these generalship traits or military type traits can apply to everybody anywhere at any time, because again, in most cases, leaders in other areas of life also have the same, they have to act in the same way to be effective leaders. So these generalship traits are important. They will be referred to throughout the school year. You need to know them, understand them, be able to refer to them, and so this is one of probably the most important lectures that we'll be doing. I will be telling you what to write down here in a few minutes. You don't have to write anything down yet, except for that this is generalship traits. So, again, not something you need to write down, and the link at the bottom is basically where I found them. According to General Michael Diamond, U.S. Army retired, generalship is a military skill and a high commander, but one learns generalship not in a classroom, but through observing and experiencing other senior military leaders who themselves effectively exercise their generalship in challenging situations. Generalship, like leadership, reflects a learned set of skills that equip us to effectively move the things forward in our spheres of influence. So, General Michael Diamond believes that generalship consists of 11 traits that all general officer leaders need. Each of these traits of generalship can and should be readily adopted by those in positions of leadership in every sector: government, private sector, nonprofit organizations, and yes, particularly the military. So, this is what you're going to want to write down. For each slide, or each 11 generalship traits, you want to write down the main topic of what it is. This particular one is strategic visionary. And this is basically what it is. Now, towards the bottom, it is an example of what I believe would be strategic visionary. So these are just examples that are some really good examples of what I would say represents each generalship trait. So again, all I want you to write down is this right here, the main topic or the main generalship trait, and then basically what it is here. If you want to go above and beyond, you can write down who it is, but that's the most important. These two, this and this, okay? So, first one, strategic visionary. Think, act, lead, and develop others in a strategic manner. Be out in front of the fray, meaning be out in front of your troops, right, as being a leader. To an extent, you have to be a futurist or be able to look at things and see the art of the possible, meaning that you're not fighting the past, you're fighting the future. You got to understand that as time changes, warfare may change. Not just warfare, business, right? I mean, any business that doesn't change is doomed to fail. So this idea is that you are a futurist, right? You see the future and you act upon what you think is going to happen. Generals have to take risks to have a shot at success and ultimately win wars. The key here is to be willing to move out in uncharted territory. So the person that I chose for this one, and I think is good, is Erwin Rommel. Now, any of you guys who are World War II fans would know that this guy was probably the best, or one of the best, German generals on the German side. Unfortunately, with Hitler being as insecure as he was, he didn't really let Rommel do his job, and again, eventually he would be basically sandbagged, I guess you would say. So Rommel never really reached his full potential. But He epitomized the blitzkrieg, and the blitzkrieg is that lightning warfare, right? You use these tanks and armored vehicles, and you basically suppress the enemy, right? You move in fast before they have a chance to defend themselves, and so it confuses and dismays their opponents. And again, he was very good at being in the right place at the right time. He was good at fending off counterattacks. He took risks. He knew these were calculated risks, though. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He didn't just go out there and assume he would do well. So again, Erwin Rommel, a really good strategic visionary. He took risks, smart ones, and he did very well for himself. Decisive. Make decisions and make them at the right time. Exercise prudence to ensure snap judgment and delayed decision making doesn't hinder achieving critical mission objectives. So basically, making the right decisions at the right time. If you look to a leader and they can't make a decision, right, then you're going to question, their leadership. So even if it may be the wrong decision, if you feel confident that that is the right decision, your men will follow you, because you don't really know you're wrong until something bad happens, right? But if you feel confident, in most cases, you will be followed by your subordinates. Now, Karl von Clausewitz, he is the person, he wrote On War. It's a book, it's a strategy, although we don't really look at it. If you were really interested in military strategy next year, I have a copy. I can tell you where you can get a copy. They're on the Amazon for super cheap. It's a really interesting book. So, but it really talks about more so the modern warfare model of war. So our conviction that only a great battle can produce a major decision is founded not on the abstract concept of war alone, but also on experience. All fortunate generals, and not only the bold and daring and the stubborn, seek to crown their achievements by risking everything in decisive battles. And again, you will find throughout history that leaders in war happen sometimes by luck to make the right decision, and they're the ones who win the war or the battle, and so they get the rewards of that. Courageous. Exercise physical and moral courage to serve as the beacon for others, to emulate and follow. Moreover, leaders do the right thing for the right reasons at the right time. On this one, I chose Joan of Arc. She basically, again, you do not see women throughout history, especially early history, who fight in wars. But Joan of Arc was one of those women. And so she showed courage just because, just gender alone, right? And you look at how courageous she was. She's going against men, not just men on the battlefield, but you're talking about men in the political realm as well, where men hold all the power, right? And so she was courageous in two different ways. I mean, both in the political way, but also in the military way. And so obviously she impressed the French leader. They gave her control of the army, which was unheard of, right? She inspired devotion. She led her troops into battle. She was even wounded, and she was eventually captured and executed by the English. So, I mean, just imagining that as a young, she was a young woman too. But she had self-confidence, and she believed that God had decided this for her. So really an amazing woman. Being accountable, right? That's another generalship trait. Lavish praise on subordinates, which basically means like reward your subordinates or the people who work under you when victories occur. And then take responsibility when the team falls short of their objectives. Always start to correct actions with oneself, which basically is this, right? You do not do this alone. Your subordinates help you to achieve your goals. So you need to reward them and make them feel valued. But when something goes wrong, you need to make sure that you take responsibility for your actions. Yes, there may be subordinates who did not do their job as well, but if the failure was due to your decision or something that you had come up with, then you have to take responsibility and not just blame subordinates for when things go wrong. And there's something to be said about leaders who realize that they made a mistake. When you say, you know what, this is something I did wrong. I'm going to learn from this experience, and you know, that'll change my behavior for the future. There's something to be said about that. And so again, being accountable is important. The person I use for this one, Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. He was also a World War II British general, highest ranking. Every soldier must know before he goes into battle how the little battle he is to fight fits into the larger picture, and how the success his fighting will influence the battle as a whole. And again, he was obviously knows that each individual has a part to play in a battle or in the war, and so they must be appreciated for that. Now this right here is Operation Market Garden, which happened in World War II. They attempted to invade Netherlands, or if you know the Dutch, they attempted to. It was a failure. It was basically came up. This idea was come up by Montgomery. It was a failure. It didn't work, and so he realized that he had made a mistake, and so he admits it here. It was a bad mistake on my part. I underestimated the difficulties of opening up the approaches to Antwerp. I reckon the Canadian Army could do it while we were going for the Ruhr. I was wrong, and so he admitted that he made a mistake. Next one is integrity. Quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. There's no room for questionable character in generals, generalship, or leadership. And I think this one is I don't have to explain any more than that, what integrity is. So this is Vice Admiral James Bond Stockdale. He was actually a POW in the Vietnam War. He was a pilot, Medal of Honor recipient for the Navy. And so he states here, integrity is one of those words which many people keep in that desk drawer labeled too hard. It's not a topic for the dinner table or a cocktail party. You can't buy or sell it. When supported with education, a person's integrity can give him something to rely on when his perspective seems to blur, when rules and principles seem to waver, and when he's faced with hard choices of right or wrong. And I think we all struggle sometimes with our morals and making the right choices. But overall, if you can try to make the right choices, right, being honest, having integrity, it's hard. Sometimes it's hard having integrity and being honest. But in the long run, I believe that it makes you a better person and it improves your life. Next one is drive. Make something happen. You can have a good plan and a good team, but someone must drive the team to the top of the summit. A good general, a good leader is able to not just push people, right? You're not pushing people into battle, right? You need to lead them into battle. You must give them the drive to want to. Sometimes they're putting their lives at risk for you, for their comrades, right, in battle. You don't get people to do things by forcing them to do it. So you want to help give drive to this team, and again, have drive for yourself. So the person I chose for this one is Geronimo. Obviously, this was towards the end of the 19th century when the Americans were basically moving through North America, taking control of Indian lands. So one of the most pivotal moments in Geronimo's life was in 1851 when he returned home from a trading excursion from Mexico. He found his wife, his mother, and 3 young children murdered by Spanish troops from Mexico. This reportedly caused him to have such a hatred of the whites that he vowed to kill as many as he could. From that day on, he took every opportunity he could to terrorize Mexican settlements, and soon after this incident, he received his power, which came to him in vision. So again, he had a vision from God, which basically said that he was meant to do this. For 35 years, on and off, Geronimo conducted a guerrilla-style war on Mexicans and later American troops and citizens once Americans basically took control of that land. So next one is team builder. Team that must be built here is very high level. Alliances and different parts must be brought together in unison to achieve much of their higher goal. And then you have basically team builder is that idea of like building alliances or building, bringing people in to your team or bringing people into your community and basically making them theirs. So a team that must be built here. So again, Genghis Khan, an army of donkeys led by a lion is better than an army of lions led by a donkey. And basically the reason why I chose Genghis Khan, a lot of people, Genghis Khan was given a bad rap because, again, he was seen as being very violent. But he was able to unify one of the largest, the largest land empires of all time. And when you look on how much land and how many cultures he had control of, if you submitted to Genghis Khan, he basically gave you he would give you the riches that you deserve. And again, you would obviously have to trade with him. He would get what he would, but he would immediately, if you submitted to him, you did your alliance with him, he would basically reward you for that. So the idea here is, although he gets a bad rap for being violent, he actually was very good at building alliances as well. Next one is change agent. Basically recognize who or what needs to be changed and then commit to making that required changes. Most people focus on the what, forgetting that the who's are the ones that drive the what. So people are sometimes happy with status quo, which basically status quo is that idea of everything needs to stay the same. But status quo doesn't always work, right? When things stay the same, sometimes it doesn't really work in a world, right? In a world that's changing. And so if you're not changing with the times, then you are deemed to fail, which in many cases happens, right? You see that in the business world, you see that out in real life. If you don't change with the times, then you probably will fail. But sometimes it takes a leader to make those changes, right? You have to change from the top down. You can't just do it from the bottom. You need somebody who's a leader who's going to change things. So I picked Hannibal. The way he thought outside the box. He really, instead of attacking, which again he was attacking Rome. This is during the Punic Wars. Instead of going directly for Rome, right, attacking the peninsula of Italy, he had a completely different idea. And so perhaps the single greatest logistical triumph in military history, Hannibal almost destroyed the armies of Rome by ingeniously marching an army of elephants from Africa through Spain over the Alps. And if you don't know what the Alps are, these are very high mountains in northern Italy. And basically he was able to march much of his army around from Spain and around down the peninsula of Italy. His envelopment and destruction of a much larger Roman army at Cannae was also the worst defeat ever suffered by Rome in its history, credited with stating, "We will either find a way or make one." Hannibal's march over the Alps was not only a military success, but also an exceptional feat of engineering science. And again, you can look that up, March Across the Alps in 218 BC. Now, you got to remember, though, I mean, they didn't win the war. Hannibal, unfortunately, or Carthage, they lost that war. But he had a really good chance. The problem is he just didn't quite have enough resources to take Rome. But he basically had them on the backs of their heels. So this was he made a change. He tried something outside the box, and he succeeded to a certain extent. Next one, standards. Maintain high personal standards for oneself. Equally important is to set and enforce the standards for the rest of the organization. The person I chose for this one, Napoleon Bonaparte. Really great example of basically having high standards not only for himself, but for his subordinates. And you would always see that even though he got a little pompous and overconfident towards the end of his reign, which is normal when you have absolute power, right? I mean, in most cases, when you have absolute power, you tend to have overconfidence in things. But throughout most of his reign, he had very high standards as a leader. And so concentration of strength, activity, and firm resolve to die with glory. These are three great principles of military art, which have always turned fortune favorable to me in all my operations. Death is nothing, but to live defeated and without glory is to die every day. So he really believed that you have to keep yourself to a higher standard. It's important to die I guess you would say, in a way that was glorious or at being at your best, rather than being a coward, running away, and then dying. So this idea is having high standards for yourself, saying that you're going to do something and then do it. Poise. This probably, of all of them, this is my favorite. I truly believe that being classy is important. Being a person who has a certain amount of class. I'm not saying you have to be classy all the time, but I do believe that to a certain extent, I really believe in good sportsmanship. I believe in treating your opponent with some respect, right? I mean, you can be at war, but still have respect. So poise is lead with style and class, and always conduct yourself in a level-headed manner. And this right here, Vice Admiral Helmut High was a German commander of the Admiral Hipper. It's a heavy cruiser. It's a large ship in the German Navy. Basically, this is during World War II. I didn't know it until I started looking things up like this, but this was a really interesting circumstance. So while taking a ship to Trondheim, Norway, which was occupied at the time, in April 1940 to land invasion troops there, Operation Wesenberg, he encountered a British destroyer, HMS Glowworm, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roop. Roop attempted to sink the Hipper with 3 torpedoes and then attempted to ram the Hipper 3 times its size. So again, this destroyer, or the heavy cruiser, is 3 times the size of this destroyer. But Roop, he was absolutely determined to try and sink this heavy cruiser that was going to be bringing invasion troops to Norway. Now, although there was a collision, the Hipper was minimally damaged and eventually sank the Glowworm. So the Glowworm, HMS, the British destroyer, was eventually sunk. High sent a message to the British Admiralty through the Red Cross, which again, the Red Cross is kind of intermediary between the two countries. You can send mail through the Red Cross, and it will get from one place to the other. He sent a message to the British Admiralty praising the gallantry of Glowworm's commander and crew, and this contributed to Lieutenant Commander Roop's receiving obviously after he dies, the Victorian Cross or Victoria Cross, and it's the first one of that war. So he didn't have to do that, right? This is your enemy. It's somebody who is trying to sink and kill you. And Hai realizes that it's just war. He was doing his duty, right? Roop was just doing what he was supposed to. He was doing what needed to be done, and he realized that. He didn't have to reach out to the Red Cross and let them know what a great job, right? He tried to do in killing him, but he realized how important it is to respect your opponent. He also, which he didn't have to do, rescued and saved about 40 British sailors. When again, he's putting his ship and crew at risk when doing so. So this is a really good example of having class, right? Yes, they are your enemy, but do you have to treat them as if they are subhuman? No. Next one, diplomatic. Create political alliances outside of your own organization to achieve common goals and objectives. Otto von Bismarck is a really good example. You have to be diplomatic. When you talk about the art of war, when you get to military strategy, we talk about the art of war. And Sun Tzu basically says that you don't want to go to war unless you have to, right? I mean, war is never a good thing. And when you talk to people, you'll find that war is never ideal. What ends up happening, war is basically the end of negotiations. It's when all diplomatic ties have failed, and so now you have to use the military to basically get your point across. But you should never really, war should not be your first option. And so being diplomatic first to basically save lives as a military leader is very important. So politics are not a science based on logic. They are the capacity of always choosing at each instant and constantly changing situations, the least harmful and most useful. And anyone who has ever looked into the glazed eyes of a soldier dying on the battlefield will think hard before starting a war. In most cases, major wars, they start decades after the last one because people forget, right? They forget about how devastating wars are. And so then they're rushed to go to war, and then we have this war, many people die. God, we're not going to have another war. And sure enough, we do. That is it, folks. So in regards to this, again, make sure you have all of them, all 11, and make sure that you know them well. Thanks.